Hey everyone on LinkedIn, going live now to discuss one of the recent episodes of the Happier at Work podcast. And I'm in a slightly different location today. I'm actually at the Dublin Tech Summit today and yesterday, and really enjoying myself here now, but I had to try and find somewhere really quiet. So forgive me if you hear a little bit noise in the background. You may hear something going on, but it's all good. I found a quiet place, quiet enough, hopefully. Delighted to welcome Steph Brady to the conversation today to talk all things belonging at work. So if you haven't checked out the full episode of the podcast, you can do that. The link below should take you to the full episode of the podcast. We have a brilliant discussion. We probably could have gone on for a few hours. I think you'll agree there, Steph. But I mean, such an important topic. And when I posted about it on my own LinkedIn, so many people were saying how important a topic it is and how much they were looking forward to tuning into it as well. So you are absolutely so welcome, Steph, to the LinkedIn Live today. And I mean, the purpose of this really is to give people a flavour of the kinds of things that we spoke about on the full podcast episode. We'll be talking for maybe about 10 or 15 minutes just about some of the key points. But if you haven't watched the full episode of the podcast, definitely go and check that out, like I say, using the link below. So, Steph, you're absolutely welcome. Do you want to kind of give people a flavour about who you are, kind of both aspects to you and the personal side as well? So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thanks. So I am really passionate about all the things that you are, Aoife, actually. We share a lot of commonalities, and I'm very lucky to have two jobs. I have what I call my day job, which is head of HR for a company called inMotion. I think one of my colleagues is there actually at the Tech Summit. And in inMotion, I've been with the company since we were 30 people, an Irish startup, and now we're a global company, and I've loved every minute of it. It's like it's been a different job and also a different version of myself every year, which I love. That's totally the environment I thrive in. And then also I'm very lucky that my company allow me to have my side hustle, which I do at weekends and on holidays and in the evenings, which is called StephBe. And that's where I coach and I write and I speak. So it was lovely to be invited to the podcast because that's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, talking, exactly. Talking. Yeah, this is it. So, I mean, maybe we'll start with this idea of maybe just like what does belonging really mean to you? Like, and let's get a definition. And if there's anyone watching live today, do feel free to pop in your questions. If you have any comments as we go throughout, it'd be really great to get a bit of interaction and see what people think. If you're watching on the replay, or if you're watching a little bit later, again, feel free to do that. I think the way LinkedIn operates, we don't necessarily see the comments, so it'd be really great if you could tag either one of us if you have a specific question or something like that. But as the comments come through, I'll be able to see them live as they come through. Maybe it's like 10-20 second delay, but I will certainly look at your questions and comments as they come through. So Steph, going back to this idea of belonging, like, what do you think belonging really means at work?
So I think because I have both not belonged and then belonged, I think I see how important it is, maybe more so than somebody who's always belonged or maybe somebody who's never belonged. And that's been both true for me in my private life. When I came to Ireland, I was 5, and I don't think I really belonged until I was nearly in my 40s. And also in work, I worked in places where I really didn't belong. And now I work in a place here and in the company before, I utterly belonged. And I can see the difference in both my performance and in my general levels of satisfaction. They are generally high most of the time, right?
Yes.
So belonging for me is feeling like I can be my best self and my true self, and feeling like I'm at home when I'm in work, which I know, look, I'm a coach and I speak to so many people who don't like their jobs or don't like them enough. And I count myself so lucky to have worked both in inMotion, and then previously I was in Dixon's for 7 years, and I felt at home. I felt loved. I felt cared for. I felt like people have my back. People want the best for me. And yeah, it's very nice to be in that environment. And I know those environments aren't everywhere.
But you might say that you're happier at work.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we spoke about in the podcast, it's a two-way street. You can't just sit there and wait for it to happen.
Yeah.
I take a lot of action to belong. So belonging is also a verb. In that, like, I do a lot to belong. And I don't mean do a lot as in neediness, there's a lot of self-work that goes into belonging. There's a lot of self-awareness. There's a lot of emotional intelligence. There's working. I was teaching this morning a value session that's very popular in RIM. And, you know, we belong by behaving in our values most of the time, you know? So I don't think you'd sit there and wait for the company to make this all happen and beautiful. I think I had very much a part in my belonging.
Yeah. And like, that's something that really stood out for me in our podcast discussion, you know, and if anyone wants to listen to the full episode, as I mentioned, the link is below. If you want to check out the full episode, we do talk about this, you know, the kind of process of belonging. But exactly like that, Steph, I have been in situations where I really felt like I belonged in this organization. And I've been in situations where I thought, this is really not the right place for me at all. And like, to know the difference between that and to really seek out something where you will belong. And I'm a huge, and I know you are too, believer in the concept of values and behaving in line with your own personal values as well as the organization's values, and finding a company where your values and the company values align, or at least the behavior in the organization. Because again, I've been in companies where they say the values are one thing, but actually, you know, they're not really behaving in such a way that reflects what they say the values are. So that's really, really important as well. So, you know, it's like 100% agree in relation to the importance of feeling like you belong, because I think when you feel like you don't belong, then you're more likely to quit. And I know certainly I did in situations where I felt like this is really not the right thing for me at all. And I'm not sure if I've shared with you yet, but I did my dissertation research, and I just graduated there on Monday, finally, after waiting for nearly 2 years to be able to have a physical graduation. But it was really more the celebration. You know, we got the scroll and everything before, but I did my dissertation research all about this concept of fit and how we fit in at work and what that means and what are the drivers of that. So it's an area that I'm hugely passionate about, from personal experience, both from a hiring people, but also from a being hired perspective, but also from a from a professional. Like, I can see the benefit that it really has for organizations as well. So that was just kind of one aspect of something that we spoke about on the podcast. Like, I think he had some really interesting insights to share around that. Do you want to kind of expand a little bit more on that and kind of take the concept a little bit broader in terms of belonging and what that means?
Well, I think I'd love to touch on something you just said there about the hiring. So I take hiring as a very ethically very important to me, because and this is probably where I got into the whole concept of belonging. I like observing people, right? And I'm really interested in, you've got a company that's pretty neutral in a lot of ways, and you've got people who love it and people who hate it. So I started kind of examining, what is it about the company or about those people? So I started being able to identify the kind of people who would love it in RIM and the kind of people who wouldn't. And really, we've tried to make sure that our interviews get that out of you. And it's not that necessarily we're rejecting you for RIM, but sometimes I genuinely don't think you would like it, because you might need more structure. You mightn't enjoy the chaos that some of us enjoy. You know, there's things about RIM that I adore, and I know other people absolutely hate. So I think it's really important that we're responsible in our hiring. And one thing I try to do when I'm hiring for my own team is I'm very clear of what the problems are, the top 5 problems that they're going to have to deal with. How bad those problems are, what my vision is for that problem, because I've got a vision for each one of them. You know, what are the opportunities in the problem? But I need them to know coming in, and I need to know they have an appetite for that problem. Now, if they have an appetite for it, the chances are they're going to really enjoy the job, right? Because that's what we deal with. That's what we're hired for, as, you know, the service people in the company. We're hired to solve the difficult problems. So I really need to understand that when I'm interviewing people is, are you going to like it here? And if you don't, you probably shouldn't take that chance, because that's a big risk when it's your career and you're leaving a job that you like, to take a chance on us.
Yeah.
And I think more companies should take that much more seriously and be much more open and honest in their interviews, because there are going to be people who love people will love my crazy little, area. But there are people who look at it and go, Jesus Christ, not for me. And I think it's really important that we don't paint this picture that's not a real picture to entice people in. So I take that very seriously, and I've got a new TA team, and we're totally on the same line with that. We're looking for intrinsically motivated people who will love our environment, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking my language. There is so much to dive into there, Steph. Like, first of all, from an ethical perspective, like, it's just simply the right thing to do is to hire the right people into your business. From your own perspective as a business, making sure that you get the right people, the right fit, and from the career perspective of the person who's coming into that organization, because it is a big decision, I think, to take on a new role. And if you make a terrible decision, you're kind of like, well, am I stuck here now for 2 or 3 years? Because, you know, otherwise it looks really bad on my CV. Let's be real. And then from an organization's perspective, if you're bringing someone in and they don't quite fit in, you know, it's going to cost you money in the long term, because, you know, it brings morale down. It brings, you've invested all this money in hiring this person and they don't really fit in. They're not being productive. They're not happy in the position that they're in. So from an ethical perspective, I think brilliant. It's so important. I love what you said about like finding someone who loves that challenge, knowing exactly who it is who's going to belong, who it is who's going to fit in that organization, but whether or not they are going to enjoy the challenge and being real about those challenges. You're so right. So many people, you know, from an organization's perspective, it's like, oh, we need bums on seats, essentially. And I've been in that position myself, because if I don't hire someone, then I'm the person who has to do that job. So I need to get someone in quickly, and I need to get them in, you know, whether they're going to fit in. And I didn't even think about that at the time. You just kind of want to get people in and you want to get them in quickly. You know, so from an organization's perspective, trying to get people in, but not being honest about what's really going on. Like, what are the actual challenges that we have in this business, and being real about that in the interview process, where you're being open, you're being vulnerable about that, and saying, here are the real challenges that you're going to be working on. Is that something that will light you up? Is that something that excites you to work on? Because most of the time it's, you know, either people are afraid to ask or they don't ask, or if they do ask, the company is kind of skirting around, like, oh, we don't have any problems here, or they're just you know, kind of skirting over the entire situation. They're not being real, they're not being honest about it. But like the whole purpose, and, you know, the whole interview process can be a conversation for a different day. Don't get me started on, you know, the merits of interviews and CVs and all of that kind of thing, because I'll go off on my soapbox now. But really, you know, if that's what most people are using is this interview process, then both sides need to be real about it. They need to be honest, treat it as a two-way process. It's no longer I'm interviewing you and therefore you know, you're in a position of power, you know, I'm in the position of power because I'm the one who's interviewing you. Now it's more of a two-way street, and you get to ask questions and be really clear. And I think, again, going back to this idea of self-awareness, being really self-aware of what it is that lights you up and what doesn't, like what kind of frustrates you at work, and being able to ask those kind of questions of the hiring manager, of the HR team, all of that kind of thing is really, really important for determining that. On a kind of a slightly separate note, one of the things that I'm focusing on here at the Tech Summit, so for anyone who kind of joined late, I'm at the Dublin Tech Summit today, so there might be a little bit of noise in the background. I tried to find the quietest place that I could, and I thought I found somewhere, but it pretty much is the quietest place. But I do have an idea for a technology solution. So I'm kind of bouncing ideas around people. I'm getting feedback. I'm seeing what else is out there at the moment. What are people doing? But I think for me, this idea of belonging at work and the idea of being able to find something where you're going to fit in, like that's my sort of big idea that I'm working on at the moment. And anyone who listens to the podcast, you will have heard me looking for pilot companies to take part in a trial to prove that this actually works, so that I can build up that technology to drive that at scale. So that's kind of a complete aside from what we were talking about. But back to the task at hand and the podcast that we were talking about. One of the other things that we spoke about was this idea of setting clear expectations and actually being real. And that's not at the kind of hiring stage. This is more like just within, with, you know, when you've started working somewhere, actually creating that environment where it's okay to speak up and you know, again, setting clear expectations can be a conversation in itself.
I could talk to you all day about that, because I have so many opinions on how it can be done really well, and what I'm learning as I'm doing it, you know, because I don't think I've got all the answers, but I think I've got all the questions. This
is it. And I think the only thing that we can do really is learn from our mistakes, identify where we haven't done things maybe as we could or should have done, taking time out of our busy days to actually reflect on that and say, well, how could I do that differently next time. But yeah, setting expectations, I mean, again, that could be a whole other podcast topic on itself. But the importance of actually being able to be honest at work and creating that psychologically safe environment. Do you want to kind of touch on that a little bit before we wrap things up?
I am obsessed with psychological safety, and it's like my number one aim in my team. And I'll give you an example. We have a new lady on the team, and she messaged me yesterday and she said, I know you're very busy, but, and I said to her, because again, I do a whole expectation setting, almost 2 hours with each person on the team, but we haven't done it yet. I said, you'll be finding out on Wednesday that I put my team first all the time, because I learned the hard way when I didn't. And what I've learned from putting my team first. Now, that's hard to do some days. Like some days my calendar is jammed, so I've got to figure it out and be really creative with that person. How do we get that 10 minutes? But like, I want her to know that if she's nervous, if she's worried, if she's got anything on her mind, let's just deal with it now. Let's just deal with it, sort it out. So we had a great chat yesterday evening, really reassuring her, really kind of getting her, back down, because I'm really lucky. I work with a lot of women who are really hard on themselves in that they want to do an amazing job. So pull them back and say, whoa, let's just learn. Let's just observe for a while. You don't need to get stuck in yet. And that's just so important to me that, day 2, I'm constantly messaging about psychological safety and how I create it and the tangibles. So in other words, I said to her, never, ever say to me, you're a busy lady. We're both busy ladies, but you're on my team. So I will prioritize you every time. Because I need you to feel safe and secure and comfortable and confident, because you're going to do a great job if that's how you feel, right? So it's so important to me. It's like number one priority when I have a new person on my team.
This is something you picked up, before we kind of completely wrap things up, and it's starting to get a little bit noisier here now. I read a book over the weekend, which was called The 1 Minute Manager. I don't know if anyone, it's been sitting on my bookshelf for a long time. It's been sitting there for a long time. It's really short. It's really quick read, maybe an hour or something like that. But in it, one of the key things that they say is that people who feel good about themselves do good work. So it's about making people feel good about themselves. Whereas most of the time, I think we're picking up on people's mistakes. And I know certainly that's something that I'm good at. I'm able to kind of identify things. I have really detailed kind of mind. I'm able to pick up things really quickly. But it's about catching people doing good things and doing good work and making them feel good about themselves when they come to work. I think that's really important. It's something I know certainly I need to work on for sure.
I think a lot of managers, and it's something I used to do myself, you put it on the list, right? And it goes down the list. And that's the biggest complaint you hear when people are doing their exit interviews. They didn't feel prioritized by their manager. So I learned a lesson the hard way. So I try really hard. And it's something I ask them in our one-to-ones, if there's ever anything I'm doing that makes you think of leaving the company, you'd be doing me a favor if you let me know so I can fix it as quickly as possible, because I'm not perfect and I don't pretend to be. But I'm open and curious about being the best manager I can be for each individual. So I think it's just about being curious.
Yeah. No, that's a brilliant way to look. And I think for me, curiosity as a mindset, I think is something really important. I'm naturally quite curious, and just bringing more of that strength into how I operate on a day-to-day basis, I think it's really important. I'll leave it there for now. If people want to connect with you, they should be able to connect with your tag here. And so if anyone wants to reach out, do you want to tell people a little bit more about other ways that they can reach out and connect with you if they want to do that as well?
Yeah, thank you. So on LinkedIn, I have obviously my own Stephanie Brady professional page. I've also got StephBe there. Retail inMotion. We've got a great page on LinkedIn where we do a lot of work on blogging and writing and all sorts of stuff. So you can find us on LinkedIn. Instagram is probably the biggest place I'm on because I love the interaction on Instagram. I like interacting with people.
It's a fun place to be. I do like Instagram myself now.
One of my values.
Am I allowed to say that on LinkedIn?
I know, I always do that. I say things on Instagram I would never say on LinkedIn. So Instagram is the best place to get me. And I have a website as well, StephBe.ie, where again you can see blogs and things. So.
Brilliant. Now, I can only assume that anyone who is at the Dublin Tech Summit is probably not watching a LinkedIn Live, but I was going to say, if there's anyone here, if you want to meet up for a coffee, I am here today live and in person, which is highly unusual. So if anyone wants to meet up, or if anyone has questions, comments, please post them below, and either myself or Steph will be happy to answer them. Thank you for everyone who tuned in live. Thank you for everyone who watched the replay. Really, really appreciate that, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you.